because your conversations in the back, questions about the Maslow hierarchy and self-realization, reminded me of something 10 minutes ago. And I'm depressed because two of my female students, good 7 years ago, wrote 2 theses based on research. They were just exactly about this topic, and I forgot about it. And we were asked by different partners who are not present to prepare the presentation, Magdalena and I, for them, and make a presentation in the last couple of days. And obviously we didn't have much time to prepare because we went to the mosque yesterday and we walked the streets of Bursa, so we had other things to do. But of course, we put together something, but I forgot about those 2 research studies that were excellent, done by wonderful 2 young women. And I'll tell you, with her, she has magic in her fingers. She downloaded from our website of our university in Poland. She found in the records, known only to her because she has access codes for everything there. She found one of the theses and downloaded it and copied it for me. Because the questions asked in that thesis, in both of them, were quite funky, interesting. And they were addressing this issue, why would women want to become entrepreneurs, and what they think about other women becoming entrepreneurs or getting job experience. It was exactly perfect, and I forgot about it completely. If I had like 5 hours, I would take the results that they have from this work. So I'll just have to wave my hands and tell you what it was, because it was quite interesting. But I should. So thank you, Magdalena. But Magdalena and I prepared our presentation about women. But really, who cares about Poland? We care about comparisons. We still have some information about the situation in Poland, but compared also to Turkey and other countries, of course. And then I'll talk about the research studies that my female students did. And it's important that they were female students because they were asking questions to other female students what they think about them as being entrepreneurs. So I think it's relevant, and I'm kicking myself that I forgot about it because this was exactly this, and we were desperate. Oh, what are we going to do? That's the reason I have no hair. And what are we going to do? And so on and so on. And I could have just found but this shows maybe I'm just really falling apart. Maybe my neurons are no longer as fresh as I had assumed. Okay. So that's the topic. Situations in which this should happen more often. Okay, we know some of the statistics, of course, were mentioned by Roberto already, but the situation is clearly the case. There's universal pattern, yes, that there are professional activity of women is less, statistically speaking, than men, and men, globally speaking, 77% of men are professionally active and only 50% of women. But of course, what is annoying that we count as professionally active those women who, we count as not active those women who sit at home and do nothing and they paint their fingers with, we don't know what they do, they are not professionally active. They probably must be very bored because really at home there's nothing, we come back home and it's clean and everything is done. So what would they do at home, yes? So it doesn't count as professional activity. And we already talked about it. I think it's a big lie that it doesn't count as, and I remember I mentioned the husband who called his wife a late bloomer because she went to do her PhD at the age of 50. But it implies that she did nothing for the first 50 years of her life. Don't get me started, okay? Okay, so the countries differ. I don't know why this graph is so bad, but the countries differ with respect to percentage of women who are professionally active, meaning jobs that require leaving the house. Yes? Iceland, 85% of women are professionally active. In Poland, 61%. And in general, Scandinavian countries are known to have very high percentage of professional activity for women. In Poland, we have 1 million companies run by women, and statistically it looks pretty okay that Polish women are doing fine. 30% of Polish companies are run. And this is average, slightly higher than average for for European community. Now, reasons for starting their own businesses. We found some Polish study, we translated what are the reasons. And the reasons are, what are the main reasons? The green one, good idea and entrepreneurial spirit. Possibility of making decision in own business. So the idea, maybe this is the self-realization need, is that I want to be my own boss, women say, and this is the motivation. Another is blue is okay, so there's something else than self-realization. Okay, and higher salary. Okay, so starting entrepreneurs, even though it's not an easy and stressful life, they hope to earn more than in regular kind of corporation jobs. And also because, in a sense, they know that in corporations, they will suffer from this salary gap that we'll show you statistics about, that even though no matter how hard they try, they will just have lower chance to have really promotion and really high salary. Okay, this is a picture I showed you in a different context in the past about different countries in percentage of women who are professionals and managers, but mostly in this kind of management positions. We see that Europe is much bigger than its area should indicate, which means that countries in Europe and the United States have more female managers than in many other countries. What else can we show? Sorry, the labels are in Polish, but I'll tell you what it is. In 2015, Russia had, I should have a laser here, okay. What do I press to get a laser? Okay. This is Russia, 40% of women in managerial jobs. Georgia is the same, more or less. Poland is this kind of the same. So, according to this statistic, we have higher percentage of employment of women in upper level positions than average for European countries. And Japan. This color indicates that it goes down. In Japan, it's 8%. So, in other words, it agrees with this index that Magdalena talked about Japan being the most masculine society. In this case, masculinity is not the compliment that usually comes with watching Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, you know what I mean. And it agrees, yes, 95% index of masculinity means that this is what happens. Okay. But, going back, remember that there was this interesting twist that some Middle East countries have relatively low masculinity, which means they are feminine, but it still doesn't mean that women are professionally, have much chance to be high in professional development. Okay, this is what we did in the middle of the night, so you must forgive us. We're adding some labels only. Women entrepreneurs in Europe, which means this is index gray bar, and Poland is marked here in orange. Self-employed, so women who basically start companies, this is what percentage of those companies that are single employee, basically, small, very, very micro firms, are led by women. And this is the percentage. In different countries, the average would be around 30%. Okay, now what happens in this one? Entrepreneurs who employ people, so not a one-person companies, but with some employees. Percent of those slightly larger companies that are led by women, look what happens. This is an interesting statistic. Turkey has, of course, a large number of, because this is a number of companies like that, because Turkey is a large country. But in terms of percentage, it's a dip. So much smaller percentage of firms in Turkey are led by women than basically look at this, that any other country on this list. It shows, of course, the need for workshops like this. There's this global study called Global Gender Gap, not only focusing on income difference, but also on many other criteria. And the devil is in the details. Even though devils don't exist, but they are in the details, which means the expression that it's interesting to look more closely at what is happening, what data we pay attention to when we want to understand the situation. Now the winner, and the winner is Iceland. But this is not, mind you, 87, it's not the percentage, it's an index that is an average composite of many other ways of putting information together, but still, when you have everything together, Iceland, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and to our great surprise, Rwanda. We don't know exactly, I don't know much about the situation in Rwanda, why is it so high in terms of women's position, but it's kind of, this is the only non-European, and then Philippines. Okay, so this is, we want to look at a little bit how those scores are without going into too much detail, just to give you a flavor what variables we pay attention to when we want to understand this gender gap. Okay, this is just to show, I'll show you this in better magnification, because I want to avoid the phrase that I heard in 55 different conferences in any country of the world, when the guy comes and shows, I know you cannot read this table, but this is the table like that. But this just shows that a lot of real data go into these variables that I'll show you in more detail what they are. So this is not kind of like a political manipulation. This is real, a lot of different statistical data that they use to build this index. And it will be really difficult to manipulate the index because you would have to somehow lie about the data. So first part of this index is economic participation and opportunity. And these are the ratios that are, ratio meaning you divide value for females, you divide for males, you get a number. And usually the number is less than 1. Because in many of those indices, of those values, they are, you know, say like income for women is lower than men, so the ratio will be below 1. And female labor force participation, wage equality, female estimated income, but this will compare this. When you, what is interesting, you take women who have the same work as men, and then you compare how much they earn. And this is kind of interesting. But here is earned income in whatever jobs they have. So, of course, if males have higher ranking jobs and they earn more, their income will be higher. But it's more interesting to compare people who are, you know, both college professors to janitors working or salespeople working in similar situations. So this is quite clever to compare that. Percentage, for example, female legislators and senior officials. How many? It shows that the upper social level of professional development. Okay, next would be educational attainment. Attainment meaning how much they accomplished. Literacy rate, and usually literacy is very similar for both males and females, and very often females in many countries higher. Enrollment, secondary school enrollment, and college enrollment, this is what is measured. Health and survival, sex ratio at birth, and female healthy life expectancy over male value, which means, in biologically speaking, females live longer than males. All right. And then political empowerment. Empowerment, how much power they have. Seats in parliament is an interesting measure. What percentage of all the seats in the parliament are taken by women politicians elected to the office? Females at ministerial level, ministers, or number of years with a female head of state. Okay, but I didn't pay attention, Magdalena, and I decided that we just focus on those elected officials. Because the elected officials are interesting because in Poland we notice that women not necessarily vote for women for political office. So it's very hard to convince, for a woman politician to convince other women to vote for her. Because they don't want to. For many reasons. Okay, so labor force participation. Percent. Here we have percent of all females who are active in professionally, and males, and we divide these two as a ratio. Now, this is one of those variables that goes into this gender gap index. And we picked the following countries: Poland, Italy, and Turkey, because this is just to please the Italians, to make them feel included, you know. Just 3 of them, you know. It would be sad. And then we asked Miranda, who was here on Monday, based on her intuition, what would be 2 other countries that in everyday conversations would be used by Turks to, you know, to compare. Like in Poland, we say, we feel that we would compare ourselves, our situation to Slovakia or, you know, neighbors like that, or Czech Republic, but not necessarily to Switzerland. In the same way here. And she said, it was her very informal advice, Russian Federation and Greece. And Iceland, we included here Iceland because it was the leader of the overall situation. Now, we did something else, but we don't really have time to do it. Magdalena mentioned this masculinity as a dimension of culture. And remember, you may remember that there were 6 different dimensions of culture that were described by a researcher named Gerd Hofstede. And you were very right saying that masculinity was a stupid name for one of those 6 dimensions. And I agreed that it was kind of stereotypes. And it was not really about sex, it was about relationships versus achievement, you know, stuff like that. So this was a good point. However, what we did is we compared globally. There are data that for many countries on all those 6 dimensions. And you know what? We were curious what Turkey is most similar to. And you know what countries, just kind of mathematically, without thinking about it, where the differences in scores were just giving the smallest possible number. Brazil, Turkey is very close to Brazil, to Spain, to France, and to Greece. But Brazil, you are practically Brazilians. I don't know why, it's an interesting issue in itself, but Spain and France, very close to Turkey, in overall dimensions of culture. Maybe it's some big discovery that, you know, should be emphasized But still, we are not going into this. We are picking just Russia and Greece as this kind of intuitive comparison. What we heard is relevant. Okay, so what we see is Iceland, of course, is the highest, very high percentage of women, and this ratio is very high. And what? Turkey is low, which means that fewer than on average in other countries women are professionally active. Salavi, that's the situation. And this is a measure. Oh, we kind of talked about it. Sorry, we can skip that. This is the activity in parliament. How many are elected, not selected, to parliament? In Poland, we have, and this adds up to 100% because this is percentage. In the parliament, we have 27% of seats occupied by women elected members of the parliament, and 73% male chauvinist pigs, yes? Well, I shouldn't say. They are members of Polish parliament, wonderful males. Okay, Italy, 1/3, not much more than Poland. Of course, because we know that Italians are very macho. Okay. They don't have Russian Federation and Greece. Greece are even more masculine themselves. And Iceland, and of course, those countries where the gap is the smallest, look what happens. Iceland, still, of course, it's not 50-50. Yes, the expectation is if at birth we have 50-50, the slightly greater biological probability that boys are born. Tiny little bit. But we can assume it's 50-50. When you toss a coin, it's 50-50 for, we assume what's the likelihood that a boy will be born. So that's the idea, yes? That 50-50 in the parliament, if they are born 50-50. So this is, we clearly see that this is the tendency in those most advanced countries where the equality of gender is achieved almost. They are still not there at 50-50, but it's close. Now, it means that Turkey and Russia still have a way to go in terms of activating political life, careers of women. This is a picture that we found, and we didn't have time to replace it with English subtitles, but what is it? This is the parliament. This is the parliamentary situation, 22%, but now recently we have 27%. Okay, but this is probably not from the latest edition. Okay, this is what it is. But among the candidates, we have 42 to 58, which is pretty good, because we should expect that 50%, that they should apply, they should run for offices with the same probability. That would indicate that women don't have social or mental blocks preventing them from even running. But still they do, because it's not 50-50, it's 42 versus 58. And they lose. They lose to male, testosterone-loaded male politicians. So that's the politics is still testosterone game, yes, based on assertiveness. That's the idea. Okay, should I show anything from this picture, or this was probably the most important? Okay. Wage equality for similar work. This is what I meant. Would be interesting to compare. Poland, women get 53% of what men do. Men get for the same kind of work. Iceland, almost 80%. So still, you can say that Icelanders are still sexist, 80% kind of. They still have 20% to go, because full and ideal wage equality would be one. But still, it's they are the closest to full equality. And in Turkey, it's even higher than in Poland. which means that on average, women earn 59% for similar work what men earn. Okay, so this is quite an interesting index, and it shows how far we are from equality. Now, for women at selected jobs, basically this, taken from a completely different database, but we found similar comparison for Polish situation in 2010. Okay. Red are men, blue are women, and just selected jobs, but in pairs, which means for the same thing. For CEOs, male CEOs earn 16,000 Polish currency, and female CEOs only 9,000. So the big gap here, and usually the gap goes down. If you can tell, even statistically, it would be nice to compute the ratio, because the disparity, the difference disappears the lower you are in the ranking of kind of social ranking. And so the difference in the height of bars is 8,400 salary for key accountant manager and 6,700 for female accountant manager. The difference for cashier is 1,700 Polish currency versus 1,500. And of course, percentage, it's only 200 difference, but percentage is still lower than in this case. So that's the situation, that women always earn less depending on the job. And there's an interesting twist. We have, in Polish language, we have this terms that are feminine, describing jobs for women. They are slightly different, like secretary. Secretary would be the male secretary, and sekretarka is the feminine job describing a lady secretary. And usually, when there's lady secretary, is really the office assistant typing, thing. And when male secretary usually is a job that is in a managerial position. So my wife had a clever observation, is that, and there's a big debate in Poland, is that making fun of those feminist politicians who say, I'm not a minister, a woman said once. I'm not a minister of education, I'm ministra of education. Which means that it's a Polish feminine ending for a female doing that. I'm not a professor, I'm profesora. In Spanish, that's the distinction. Profesora is an accepted form for a university profesora. Now, in Polish, profesorka is okay to say profesorka for feminine, but it means only, it's tolerated only for high school profesorka. But for university, if you call a woman profesorka, it means, oh, it's a faux pas, because it means that she's not really a full professor. Profesorka is kind of dyrektorka and director. Director is it. Dyrektorka could be a dyrektorka of in a culture activity room in a small village. She could call herself dyrektorka, because socially, jobs that the lower they are, the easier we are in Poland to accept Polish names for it. Sekretarka. It's okay. But dyrektorka, only if it's low-ranking dyrektorka. And at the level of corporations, she would never allow herself to be called dyrektorka, because she's director. It sounds funny in Polish ears. Those endings that are feminine are making the job less important. And it's a very, and the battle goes on. We accept the janitorka, the cleaning lady, without any problems, and sekretarka, without any problems, but we object to ministra. So, in Poland there's a lot of mental programming that needs to be done to undo this, so that ministra doesn't sound funny, but sounds equally important as minister. I'm not sure if in Turkish language you have similar distinctions or not. You do?
Yes, hemşire, nurse, means nurse. For men, called as hemşire.
Okay.
Hemşire, hemşire.
But which sounds more serious and professional? Is there kind of public perception? That's interesting what I mean. Do the feminine endings of the job names make you less serious? And it's very unfortunate that in Poland they do. What is it like in Italian? In Italian they said, we understand. Okay, you take whatever people earn. So, without equalizing job by job, you just, women earn 60%, 64%, in Turkey 44%, in Iceland 72%. So even the super equal Iceland, still it's a very visible difference in what women earn and what men earn. There's another whole monograph published in a similar way now, focusing specifically on female entrepreneurship. And unfortunately, they analyzed 77 countries. The output is very boring, so I don't want to bore you with this because it's just okay. Countries differ. The female entrepreneurship index is built just like the other one that I showed you, with several components. The winners are the green, intense green. America, high, very active female entrepreneurship. Australia and Scandinavian countries, Germany and France as well. And now Poland is here, and Poland is kind of less active. Turkey is, where is Turkey? Is big one. Very big one. It's yellow, so it's lower. Okay. Turkey is in the 45th position. Of this index is, again, the index is hard to say what it means, 39 point whatever. But anyway, where's Poland here? This is Poland, okay. Where's Russia? The competitors. You know what Russia? Greece is here, slightly higher, but not much, basically. Okay, so how do they get those? This is the top 10, and interesting. You know, American economy is still, you know, is thriving, and female entrepreneurship specifically is winning, but with a very substantial difference. So somehow, in other words, the policies that Americans develop for, you know, supporting, kind of freeing women or convincing them that they can realize themselves, they are doing it well. And this is the structure that is, as I said, boring but very solid. They do it carefully. They put together those elements, 15 different criteria, each of which is also analyzed from the perspective of individual development or institutional development. So it gets very technical. I'm just showing this that this is meant to be, people are trying to understand what is going on, but it's hard to do. Poland versus Turkey, you know, it would take us until the late evening to analyze it step by step. So get ready, you know. We must do it, or maybe not. Okay, but anyway, this is 13 is, for example, female leadership. Poland is not so high anyway, but in Turkey it's much lower. So we know that already from the other statistics, is that there's room to work with for female leadership and other characteristics. But you see that there's a lot of characteristics that go into the computation of this one index. So when we say that Turkey is 45th in this ranking, it's a solid statement that is independent of any political cheap ways of trying to discredit one country or put United States on top. This is the result, the outcome. So this is pretty good. Russia and Turkey, in case of female leadership, this is the same criterion. We see that, in general, would you agree that Russia is a kind of interesting comparison to Turkish situation, social and other situations, or was our advice wrong? Greece and Turkey, interesting to compare or not necessarily? Or would you rather compare yourself to Brazil? It just sounds strange.
Greece is definitely a nice choice because of the historical background. As economically, Brazil is more similar to Turkey than Russia. Because both are developing countries and developing at the same rates.
I see. And also having large
nice
economic
population.
power, potentially. Okay. Well, that's a good comment. But anyway, I didn't want to torture you with those pairwise comparisons, just to show that if anybody is interested, there's a lot to get to. Reading about, for example, the structure of this. There are descriptions justifying what it means and so on. It's quite interesting, but maybe not for us. This is an interesting picture that shows correlation between overall index of wealth for a country and female entrepreneurship index. So the richer, and PPP is a special way of parity computing income or wealth of a country, taking into account differences in inflation and differences in value of the currency. So this is like basically PPP is like using how many iPods or how many hot dogs can you buy, not hot dogs, hamburgers, Big Macs. Because economists were trying to compare countries, how many Big Macs can you buy for your salary, or how many iPods can you buy for your salary. And this is a good measure to compare countries. So PPP is a fancy way of doing that without making fun of, using Big Macs, which would not be very serious. But anyway, we have an overall correlation that the richer you are, the more it means it goes with this that females are more entrepreneurial. But of course, we have outliers. We have points that clearly show Iran for its level of wealth, it's much lower than the cloud of points implies, which means that the entrepreneurship of women in Iran is much lower than it should be given its level of economic development. The same for Saudi Arabia and Singapore. United States, Australia, Chile, much higher involvement and activity of women than expected. They would be okay if they were somewhere here, but they are above the line of this showing this relationship. So analysis of specific points tells us, I don't know where Poland is here, but it shows us, makes us think about what are the reasons that Iran is so low or Saudi Arabia. We could guess the reasons, but let's not get into this. But it's interesting how we analyze it. Okay? There's some boring state support that I don't want to bore you with. NGOs, both state level and NGOs are created in Poland to support, to stimulate female entrepreneurship. The questions are, for example, who should be made to pay for all those attempts to encourage women through incentives to go into professional life? Is it the state, or should somehow employers be made responsible? But one interesting thing that I already mentioned it in debate, without knowing that I would cover it here, but it's an interesting thing. What can the state do with some manipulation? Because paying for childcare is in a good sense of the word, manipulation, that you can encourage things with money paid by the state, or you can discourage. So in Poland, we checked with Magdalena what it is. 12 months maximum, of course not mandatory, but you have up to 12 months of your paid vacation, 6 months with full salary and 6 months with 60%, or you may choose whole year with 80% salary. This is pretty decent. This is pretty good. Fathers may take paternity leave after first 14 weeks. Okay. For some reason, and we were very unpleasantly surprised by it when we read the legislation, if you're a female entrepreneur, you don't get support. They don't pay you for maternity thing. Very strange. So what we know, statistically speaking, is that 200,000 mothers per year go on maternity with full support, and only very few thousand fathers. In Iceland, the situation is different, and I mentioned it already, and look again how clever it is designed. 9 months with 80% salary, so Poland is even more supportive, because it gets, if you want 80%, you get full 12 months. But where's the trick in Iceland? Wife and husband may take 3 months each, but they must, so nobody is forcing them to take 3 months. But if a woman says, hey, I'll take 2 months, then the husband must take 2 months. If the woman says, I want to take 3 months, the husband must take 3 months. So when we were working in this architectural firm in Reykjavik for several months, there were 2 young guys at the peak of their professional careers, with all careers waiting. But they knew that they were going for 2 months on paternity leave. They were, whether they were happy or not, didn't matter, because that's the way it must be. So in other words, their professional careers were slowed down in the same way as the careers of their wives were slowed down. 3 months she takes, it means that 3 months he must take, whether he wants it or not. It cannot be like that she takes 3 months and he says, I'll take 2 weeks, I'll be nice. No, 3 months and 3 months. That's the manipulation that I mean in a good sense of the word. And so it's 3 months and 3 months is 6 months, and the remaining 3 months they can split however they like. So there is freedom. But still, you see that wise legislation is making people think and kind of pushes men to share it more equally than compared to, So the question really is, and we already had those nice conversations here in the classroom, and we're very impressed with all our friends, how thoughtful and sensitive you were and interested you were in your questions. That is that the question boils down to this. Are we decent people? Are we selfish and greedy maniacs? Or I was thinking about the words, bastards, or who are we? Yes. This is our decision in a sense, what we decide to do. And okay, so should we employ women knowing that with high percentage, high probability, at some point they will get pregnant, and my company will have to somehow competitive advantage that I was working so hard, me and my male directors, and suddenly Sylvia comes here and she gets pregnant, and we know she will. What do I do? It's not good. It limits our potential, compared to other male companies when they don't have to be so soft on those female employees. So, should we employ them? Yes. But the business will suffer. It is not in our economic interest to do that. So maybe we don't really have to give them a full-time job. We can get them a contract. And then we use the font 6 to say, if you get pregnant, then the whole contract gets annulled and it's okay, there's no way to take us to court, and you sign it, but the font is so small that nobody, and all those tricks. In case she thinks of being so erotic and gets pregnant. Something very inconvenient for our company. So, business will suffer. And the crucial question is, so what? That your company will be slowed down in its progress and competition with Google. And the response is, what do you mean, so what? The job, the race, the competition, you know, this is what we must do. But the question is, this is what I wrote here. It's a matter of our standards, how we arrange our society. We don't steal, because it would be wonderful to steal and cut costs like that, you know. Stealing, not paying for what we, you know, use. Do not kill employees to save on retirement packages. That's the worst thing, that they go on retirement and it's a mess. So, okay, we don't employ children, even though they have such lovely tiny little hands, and they could do little tiny things with those tiny little hands, and plus they are so cheap. And if they want a raise, you yell at them, no! And it's, you know, they are easy as employees. And then when they grow bigger, you just take new ones, tiny little ones. We don't do that. At least we don't officially do that. Because we know that it's not really nice to do. We already know that. But still, if we don't do those three things that I mentioned that are clearly, you know, below standards of civilized society, maybe we should not treat women unequally in the same way. So it's just a matter of our standards of how we live in our society, and whether it's a choice. So it goes down to what we choose to do as society. The same way I mentioned before, if you don't have time, you make time. If you don't see that this is a problem, you should be made to see that this is a problem, by legislation or by street protests or something like this. Like in Poland recently, you have those street protests of women against certain proposed legislations. So activity, in other words, activity. And there are, in addition, I'll finish in a moment, there are many organizations that are exactly this. It's kind of street activity, but not in a sense of public civil activity. Geek Girls Carrots is an organization that was founded in Poland, but is international. It's a community for grassroots, which means it started from zero, and it's spreading and building chapters and divisions globally. Female administrators in computer sense, analysts, application architects. So they organize meetings. They have a profile of being kind of technologically sophisticated women, and they have websites. They meet. They have workshops to kind of awaken the entrepreneurial spirit. They have websites. So Geek Girls Carrots, but they were really started in Poland here. Okay. So this is an example how to. We don't have to wait for legislators to wake up and establish some rules, but those are also very important. But there's a lot kind of informal convincing that we should do to convince women, to educate them, to motivate them, and as Magdalena said, you know, do this, do push-ups, do stuff that would wake you up, in a sense. Okay. We have nothing more to give. We gave you all we had. We are empty inside. Thank you. So,
the ending of wars and the family forms means less. I mean, it's
yes,
a lot policy.
less serious.
Yeah, like in French, for example, they use the word professor, or professor name. They say professeur, which is masculine, but they never use professeurs, which would be the feminine form.
Exactly.
They never use it.
Exactly.
doctor, they never say doctor, doctores or doctores. But the astonishing thing is, in Arabic, it's quite the opposite. I mean, the feminine names are more qualified. For example,
Where?
in Arabic language.
In Arabic.
Yeah. For example, if you say alam, which means scholar or something who have knowledge, it's the masculine one. If you say allama, which is the feminine one, it's more higher.
That's
It's
interesting.
very astonishing because you see in Arabic societies, I mean, female are, let's say, the
It's higher.
low scale. How can we explain it?
If you find a female doctor, then she made it, she's successful. How did she make it? How did she become a doctor? So they're like proud of her. She made it as a doctor. So they call her like doctor in the female way. Yeah, it's fine. It's not a problem.
That's very interesting. So my Polish comment about Polish language was just not really scientific, but from our observation. But it's interesting to see how it is in different countries. Yeah. Okay.
About the salary of women compared to the salary of men, like you showed some stats about it. Is it that women are hired by the same? It's like the same company giving less salary to women, or is it that women are hired by companies that give small salaries?
That's clever. That's clever, and I don't know how they did this study. No, that's exactly right. That's a very interesting twist to this. Whether ideal design for this would be for within the same company, take a woman, take an equivalent job for a male, and that would not be affected by this problem. That very interesting. That salaries of women would be lower because they would be directors, but in companies that pay less. And you have this is something that is addressed with a research grant for some sociology student. Perfect. This is a great question. Very smart, and I don't know, of course. But this is exactly what I meant by devil is in the details. That we should be very careful when we report for journalists, when we report results, to have the same sharp eye on possible artifacts or possible lying, from the data. Okay.
I also noticed that for a cashier, women still earn less. Don't cashiers earn the minimum wage? So even in Poland, for example, normal workers in shops, cashiers, salesmen,
Are close to the lowest
yeah,
possible.
they earn the minimum wage pretty much. So how come there's a gap wage, even though they are supposed to earn the least amount in the government?
Yeah, but because male cashiers are clearly more skillful. They do the cashiering job probably with more assertive perfection, and women may be too emotional, maybe less efficient, maybe fewer customers per minute processed. Of course, I'm kidding, but it means that women are more likely to be at the very bottom of this minimum official wage, and male cashiers, statistically speaking, still are tiny bit above. But the argument, of course, would be some kind of pretended reasons, like I just mentioned, that males are more assertive as cashiers and more efficient and contribute better to the image of our shop. Some silly thing, because usually there is no response, there's no answer to it. Okay, but we see that there is a lot of mess and a lot of problems that we need to juggle at the same time to understand this. And then a guy like him comes and says, that could be another problem. That it could be an artifact, statistical artifact that comes from something else. That we can very, very, So it's a complex situation. But anyway, thank you so much.